issue of responsibility within the work and life of Camus becomes even more pronounced when considered in light of two novels that can serve as bookends for his career as a novelist. The novel is A Happy Death and The First Man. A true test of Camus' abilities to serve as a philosopher of communication in an age of absurdity is his treatment of the nation of responsibilities. In order to navigate this difference in a manner consistent with the work of Camus, one must engage others in dialogue that allows for the sharing of different ideas and perspectives. These two works provide insight to the development and maturity of his understanding for his central concept in the study of communication ethics. So now about responsibility. According to Levinas, through a call to responsibility for another, quote, I am someone as someone irreplaceable. I exist through the other and for the other. But without this being alienation, I am inspired. End quote. The translator's introduction to Levinas' otherwise that being or beyond essence highlights four components of responsibility evidenced in the work of Levinas. That is four of all. One is responsibility as a fact. Second is responsibility as a bond. The third is responsibility is a form of recognition, and the last is responsibility is an act. Finally, Camus understood that the call to responsibility was a form of recognition for those people who were suffering or who excited to the fringes of society. One written prior to The Stranger, A Happy Death, and the other left unfinished, The First Man. Together they represent Camus' changing awareness of the issue of responsibility in the face of absurdity. One written prior to The Stranger, A Happy Death, and the other left unfinished, The First Man. Together they represent Camus' changing awareness of the issues of responsibility in the face of absurdity. Within the study of communication ethics, the question of who holds responsibility for whom is a topic that must be addressed in a changing historical moment. The preface to Communication Ethics in an Age of Diversity states that ethical communication theory, practice, and pedagogy do not occur in a vacuum. Communication ethics in this age of absurdity and diversity requires the will and ability to listen carefully, to pursue and practice mutual respect, infinite reciprocity, and inclusiveness, and to live openly and responsibly with the dialectical tension inherent in communality and difference. A summary of a response to A Happy Death and The First Man serve as the starting point for this conversation, because both books were published posthumously. This chapter does not provide a true exploration of the critical literature, but rather demonstrates how each book fits into Camus' oeuvre.
A Happy Death is one of the first works of Camus' novel title. This book was written in 1934 to 1938 and issued in 1972 after he was dead. The main character in this novel is Patrice Mersault. Natural Death consists of 5 parts. In the first part, the protagonist Patrice Mersault killed a man named Roland Zegers with disability who used wheelchair. Mersault left a note handwritten by Zegers and the gun he used to kill a man in a villa that looks Zegers do suicide.
In the second part, tale of a flashback Mersault from ordinary life to being a murderer.
He was actually an officer worker by the sea, working with a friend and spending the rest of his lunch at a restaurant. Mersault always covered up his pain. It happened when her sick mother was still alive. When she died, Mersault remained alone in the house he once lived with his mother. In the third part, here discuss Mersault's relationship with Marty. Before the murder of Zegers, Mersault has a close friend named Marty. Mersault's joy didn't last long. When Marty introduced several men to him, Mersault became jealous and wanted to learn the nature of their relationship. And one of the people is Zegers. From here, the beginning Marcel met Zagreus. The fourth part discussed the relationship between Zagreus and Marcel. Zagreus said that there was nothing he could do with the state of his leg like this. Zagreus tells Marcel that with the body he has, his only job is to live and be happy. Zagreus believed that we cannot be happy without money. Zagreus told Marcel he had collected $2 million and was kept in a safe with a gun on top of the money. And the fifth part talks about the next day where Marcel killed Zagreus and took the money. The money is used to finance his adventure. Furthermore, in the book Conscious Death is also divided into 5 parts. In the first part, when Marcel inspects a room in Prague, once in his room, he is endued with a terrible sense of pleasure. Since he had no plans in Prague, the days were long. So Marcel continued his search for happiness and left Prague. During the second half, Marcel is on the train on a journey to find happiness. While at Aussy, he sent a message to his friends Rose and Clary concerning his feelings. Marcel decides to return to Algiers after killing Zagreus. He felt it was an act of clarity and his life changed. Happiness seemed possible. Arriving at Algiers, he spent time with his friends. The third part begins when Marcel sits talking with his friends Rose, Clary, and Catherine. There was a conversation about love. This section concludes with an understanding of lifting loneliness and returning them to the world. Part 4 begins with Marcel's realization that wandering seems to be nothing more than the happiness of a restless man. Marcel decides to marry Lucien. After marriage, he traveled to his old place and left his wife. Since then, Marcel has felt empty himself. In the last part, Marcel gained awareness that there was no other reality in him. Himself felt empty and not excited. In this part, Marcel finally meets his end alone in an unhappy state.
Marcel demonstrates himself as a character who lives life in his own way. He is willing to accept life as it is, against his will. His actions against Zagreus were nothing more than premeditated assassination, but they tell us that one has to make decisions when faced with obstacle. Marcel doesn't wait for money to appear out of nowhere, but makes a deliberate effort when the opportunity arises to acquire it. His action made him a character who was in charge of his own life and sought to create meaning for himself. The second way, where that is fitting into Camus' broader work, is to tell the story of a man who maintains realistic expectation, or expectation within reasonable limits. Indeed, sometimes life is not always fair of you. Might say, it doesn't always make sense. This is the limit that must be used as a reference to maintain the level of expectation. The third way, even though Marcel sometimes gets sidetracked in his quest for happiness, he can ultimately continue acting without giving up. Falling into a state of despair becomes a very real temptation when one accepts the absurdity at any given moment. When a person realizes that everything is actually impossible, there is a great potential for despair to enter. Marcel is willing to take whatever action is necessary to overcome his obstacle to happiness. The fourth way, Marcel's involvement with life is consistent with Camus' broader work ethic is through his emphasis on the importance of deliberate choices. The First Man. This novel was found in Camus' briefcase in the tragic car accident that killed him in 1960. The novel was not published until 1995, and this is Camus' most autobiographical work. The action in this novel explores two moments, namely the childhood of the main character, Jacques Cormery, and his interaction as an adult. Various editorial changes, such as inconsistent character names, would be fixed in the script if Camus lived to finish the novel. The story is divided into two parts. The first section, entitled Seeking the Father, is divided into 9 sections. Some have chapter designation, and others do not. The first part of part 1 is untitled, and tells the birth of Jacques Cormery, the protagonist. His father, Henry Cormery, was of French about 30. The second part, titled Saint-Brieuc, shifts off the focus to the character Jacques Cormery. Cormery is looking for the grave where his father is buried. He spoke with cemetery guards and asked about the location of those who died in the War of 1914. Cormary considered his father a stranger, but one specific moment in time changed Cormary's opinion. At that moment he read in the grave the date of his father's birth, which he now finds. His date was 1885 until 1940, and suddenly he was struck by an idea that shocked him. He, Jacques, was 40 years old. The person buried under the plate, who used to be his father, is younger than him, although he never thought much of his father. Jacques realized that he had always believed that he created himself. His newfound interest in his father arose from the realization that all his energy was not enough to create himself. The third part, Saint Brieuc and Malan, begins with a conversation between Jacques and his old friend Victor Malan. Victor encouraged him, "Since you are going to see your mother, try to find out something about your father." Jacques replied, "Since my curiosity arose, I might as well try to retrieve some more information." The fourth part, The Child's Game, finds Cormary contemplating his relationship with his grandmother, an Aragon woman who closely resembles Camus' own grandmother. This section serves a transition to the fifth, which describes Cormary's reunion with his mother. In the sixth section, Family, Jacques Cormary continues to ask his mother what she knows about her late husband. The seventh part, entitled Etienne, describes Jacques' uncle, who is referred to as Ernest and Etienne in the unfinished novel. As a member of a very poor family, Ernest believes that it is always easier to become extravagant when you have nothing. The eighth section, marked 6A, School, describes the exchange between Cormary and his favorite teacher, M. Bernard. This teacher has used all his human weight to change this child's fate and his responsibilities, and he has changed it.
The ninth section, Mondovi, the Settlement and the Father, sees Jacques return to his birthplace in search of any information about his father. This trip is also unproductive because he had only gotten a little information and nothing that directly concerned his father. This lack of information gives him the feeling of one with no past, because he didn't know anything about his father, who had lost during the First World War. The first parts end with Jacques' focus of attention on the fact that he had tried to escape from anonymity unsuccessfully. The second part, The Son or the First Man, is divided into 4 sections. The first, marked 1 entitled Lychee, recounts Jacques' experience as a student at the secondary school. Jacques received a scholarship to attend the Lychee that included half board because he came from poor and uneducated family. The solid education Jacques and Pierre received from M. Bernard at the neighborhood school had, from the first year, put them in the top groups of the class. Jacques is also able to stand out on the soccer field, where he made himself respected and liked. But once he returns home each evening, there was no mention of the Lychee. Jacques continues to live this dual life, excelling in school while living in the poverty of his home. The second section, The Chicken Coop and Cutting the Hen's Throat, presents a humorous account of Jacques demonstrating more courage than his brother by being willing to catch a family chicken and to assist his grandmother in slitting its throat. This section is short and tough. It adds very little to the overall story. It provides insight into the day-to-day life in Jacques' home. The third section, Thursday and Vacation, recounts Jacques' life on Thursday, when there are no class at the Lychee, and during holidays from school. Those who live in poverty had no time for vacations, and Jacques is knowing the stories from who have the finance to travel and from the books he read in the library every week. Because he knew nothing and wanted to know everything, Jacques devours any and all books he can find. This escape through reading is unavailable to his mother and grandmother. The only life known by his mother and grandmother is one of labor. Work in this neighborhood was not a virtue but necessity. This conflict between Jacques' two worlds leads his grandmother to force Jacques to get a job during the summer between classes. At the age of 13, Jacques is being propelled towards life as the man he is to become. The fourth and final section of the book, as it is published, is marked II and titled A Mystery to Himself. This brief section sees Jacques at 40 years old, reflecting upon his childhood, in which he had the longing yes to life still more, to immerse himself in the greatest warmth this earth could give him. This longing to life characterized Jacques Cormery as both a child and an adult. Narrative engagement. As in the novel A Happy Death, several characteristics of Jacques Cormery's engagement with life are consistent with the ethos of the wider work of Camus. First, Cormery accepts the absurdity of his situation. On one condition, that faced with the humblest or the most heart-rending experience, man should always be present, and that he should endure this experience without flinching, with complete lucidity. The acceptance of absurdity is a necessary first step towards appropriately engaging the present postmodern moment. Upon reflection, Jacques recognized that he lives in poverty as a child, and yet he is able to think of it as a happy childhood. He accepts the absurdity of his situation, a situation much like Camus' own, characterized by a dead father, an overbearing grandmother, a silent and deaf mother, and a home life steeped in poverty. The second way this novel fits into Camus' work as a whole is through its demonstration of the communicative space that allows the emergence of new metaphors and a new understanding of life. Instead of neglecting the memory of his father, Jacques sets out on a quest to gain a new understanding of who the man was. He does not want to simply accept the fact that he does not know anything about his father, and is willing to track down those who could provide further information about his life. Conclusion. There is no question that Camus he was much more concerned about exploring responsibility in this last novel than he was in his first, A Happy Death. Taking responsibility for one's own actions is only part of the text. As the acts of Cormery show, the sense of responsibility takes on a reciprocal nature as others begin to feel a sense of responsibility as well. Camus' strong sense of responsibility for other human beings is a final example of the way in which he served as a philosopher of communication for an age of absurdity.